There have been studies showing that stress, whether that's about financial stress or other kinds of stress, actually decreases people's ability to think rationally about their own situation. And again, I mean, you know, of course I would put forward that if you don't have to worry about your finances, that would actually open up huge vistas in your brain about what you know, about how you could improve things. The question about, you know, what those in power are thinking about in terms of, at least I don't know about the money question, but certainly in terms of basic income, there are a lot of very scared rich people out there, all right? Some of them are smart enough to think, well, you know, actually, I can't, you know, there's a guy, Nick Hauer, I don't know if you've seen the video of Nick Hauer going on about how he can only wear so many underpants at one time, and he can only live in so many houses, and he can only drive one car at a time. You know, there are some, you know, just because somebody is wealthy doesn't necessarily mean that they've completely lost track of their own humanity. And, you know, so there are actually, you know, Adair Turner was just yesterday on some panel about inequality, I heard, was advocating basic income, all right, as a way to, you know, avoid mass upheaval in society. I mean, yes, it would avoid, you know, maybe it would avoid the, you know, kind of violent revolution. All right, it would represent, I think it would represent a revolution in our consciousness, but I think there are actually a lot of people in power who are quite aware that things are about to, you know, they're just kind of trying to keep the lid on it right now. You know, and despite the polls and despite, you know, the propaganda that we see all the time, people aren't really buying it. You know, I think there's enough, you know, what George said about the polls about UKIP voters and what they actually support, or if you know, you look at the poll, you know, if when people sort of do blind tests about, you know, which party's policies they support, they tend to support the Green Party, you know, and they don't know which party it is, and they look at policies, and that's what they actually want. So I take a lot of yeah, I was going to say comfort, but I mean, I actually take a lot of joy in that, you know, and positivity. So I think, you know, I think there's a lot, you know, there are enough people within this, you know, the system who know that things are about to blow, who, you know, who are afraid of losing what they've, you know, what they've got, or at least what you know, what they can then pass on to their kids, that they're thinking, well, you know, maybe we better share some of this out. So.
And that was behind the New Deal in the States.
Yeah, that was Roosevelt saying, right, bankers. That was, you know, that was Roosevelt saying to rich bankers, look, all right, you know, if you don't give, you know, if we don't spread some of this around, we're going to have full-blown communism. All right, so.
So I think a lot of questions have been raised. I'll try and cover a few quickly. So just on the housing, so money is also an essential, and how money gets created is also an essential part of our housing problem. With the way that banks create money, they have a choice: or do I lend to a productive business? Well, that's a bit risky. Or do I lend to some person to put on a house, and then, hey, if they don't pay, at least I got the house. So of all the money that bank lends, a huge proportion goes on making loans available for people to buy houses, which then, as the number of people able to buy the house goes up, the price goes up, and so we get into this huge spiral of increasing costs. So it's not the only aspect. There's supply side aspects as well. There's lack of council housing. There's a lot of other issues, but definitely money plays a big part in it. Banks obviously are hugely powerful institutions, very, very controlled. The decentralization I was talking about is that this top management doesn't say, I need you to make X number of loans, and so the physical decision about money creation is being made at the bottom, but absolutely the top level are controlling their interests. One thing that's really exciting that's happening next week, so an MP who's a big supporter of positive money and the move to kind of reclaim the right to public money is a guy called Steve Baker. Now he's an MP who I share very, very, very little in common with. He is on the right end of the Tory party. He's what's known as an Austrian to us economists, so they believe the state is the most evil thing that ever happened. But he's a great supporter, and he stands on the same platform right next to Michael Meacher. You know, couldn't get two more opposite members of Parliament advocating for the same thing. So it's very sad. Anyway, so this week he's put forward a motion which will be voted on to have a backbenchers debate, and it will be voted on next week. If that goes through, then there will be actual time in the Houses of Parliament to discuss this. which would be really, really exciting. So look out for an announcement next Wednesday, and if there is an opportunity for parliamentary time, then it's really about getting in touch with your MP, making sure that they're there, and this is something that's really important at the moment. In terms of where these issues are, in terms of getting any real support, in terms of money supply, money creation issues, you know, the last real time that this had a shot at working was in the 1930s. So in the 1930s in America, after the crash, most of the most eminent economic minds lined up behind what basically positive money is proposing today. So 100% reserve banking, full reserve banking, whatever you want to call it. And yet it still failed. And that was mainly due to the power of the bank lobby. And what they gave in return was a thing called the Glass-Steagall Act, which basically separated casino banking from retail banking and was a linchpin of the stability that we saw through the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s until dear old Bill Clinton abolished it. And you know, very, very quickly we saw some of the ramifications of that. So now this time we don't quite have the huge list of eminent economists standing behind us, although it is growing all the time. You know, recent supporters have included the senior economics editor for the Financial Times, who is now staunchly in favour of these kind of issues. We're seeing more and more MPs get on board. It's part of the Green Party manifesto. The IMF are actively working on this issue and understanding the benefits it could bring. So it is, from when I started working on this topic 4 years ago, where you walked into a room and said banks create money and you were just laughed out the door, now you're able to have a really constructive dialogue with people about the ins and outs of that, what the positive aspects are, and about how you can make, you know, how you can have transformation. So, but it remains extraordinarily difficult because of the power of the financial services lobby, especially here in the UK. So it remains a big challenge, but progress, as I say, from 4 years ago is amazing.
Just before we ask more questions, I think Ben wants to comment on those points.
Yes, I have no idea how long we have left. So, but I'll keep myself short because from my perspective, it's much more interesting to listen to everybody else than it is listening to me. Just two very quick things in response to comments around housing and basic income. I mean, housing is just something that everybody deals really badly with. Beveridge came up with a solution that worked in quite a lot of ways, but not at all for housing. Quite often people come up with solutions around basic income and social...
Rent control, all right? He was very clear that housing benefit needed rent control. And
But he
rent control was abolished, and that's where we're getting this housing
But he dealt badly with it, even in the sense of there are variations in housing costs across the country, and he had no way. If you have something on a national basis, and housing varies so much within the country, it's very difficult to have something that works on the same principle as the rest of the system that's fair to people. So I think we can talk a bit more about it, but generally it's like my feeling around, I work a lot on disability, and people often say, this system works really well, we're not thinking about disability in terms of their suggestions. And I always find that unacceptable because disability is, I mean, twice as many people claim disability benefits as unemployment benefit and so on. And I think the same about housing. It's when people ignore it, it's frustrating because it's central. Just around behavioural economics, we can have a chat afterwards. There's a problem with the way that the benefit system works is it takes no account of how people are, how their lives work, or indeed anything about their lives that it would want to support. And in fact, it's not the main thing of the things I would push for, but there's a lot of things that you could do without spending lots more money, just about treating people in a dignified and humane way that fits the reality of their lives. You don't, like, people do need more money to live, but there's a lot of things that could just fit people's lives better without that. I guess the thing that the thing about politics, I think it was George over there was talking about it, and the fact that there are a lot of positive impulses in people, a lot of, you know, solidaristic impulses in people, and this is, I think, a really important point about it. But that doesn't mean we can just say that people will support anything. So if you have a look, for example, at where people support things like a basic income at the moment, it's in pensions, where people are pretty supportive about it, which they see as in return for a lifetime of contribution in whatever sense that means. And it's also around children and around bringing up kids and child benefit, which until at least the coalition was a universal benefit. There was always something like but it's not. What I struggle with most of all with the basic income is seeing on what basis people are going to support it. I spend all of my time trying to look at what people think in all sorts of different ways and trying to harness those positive aspects of what people think to support a better deal for people I think get a really raw deal at the moment. And what I struggle to do is to find a way, a sequence, a shock, a revolution, anything where I can see that we're tapping into a principle that I can go out and fight for and appeal to people, where they'll support the unconditional basic income for everyone. And that's what I find so difficult about it. It's, we're a small group of people in this room. If you went out into a general election manifesto with basic income, you wouldn't win at the present time. That is probably a bad thing in lots of ways, but then what you need is a plan of how to convince people of it, and that's what I always think it fails for. I cannot win enough arguments with people on the basis of it, and I would want people here to tell me what arguments do I use with people on the principles that they hold that I can convince them to support.
So there's a gentleman at the back, the blue shirt.
Question for the panel, and maybe people in the audience might appreciate it. You spoke about.
Could you stand up, because I can barely hear you.
Sorry. Yeah. You talked about the small group of people here. Something that happened in September, the referendum in Scotland. Money was also used, and so you can't have our money if you vote no or whatever. I'm just interested in what the panel's thoughts were on the actual arguments used on both sides of that equation, and the fallout since. The retracting on agreements. I don't know. I mean, it's something that's still been examined and picked over. Well, any quick thoughts on that at all?